Hello everyone and welcome back to my Magic the Gathering Commander deck list reviews. So this is a series where I go through either my own personal Commander decks or those sent by users and break them down to their core mechanics. I go over the Commander, what the deck's generally trying to do, give my critiques, and wrap it all up with my feedback at the end. If you want to get your own deck reviewed, make sure to head up to the top link in the description to get your deck personally reviewed by me. With that being said, let's get into today's review. So today we are talking about another really cool Final Fantasy commander with Cloud Midgar Mercenary. So of course, you know, Cloud being one of the most popular and most iconic of the Final Fantasy characters. You know, I'm not even a huge Final Fantasy fan, but you know, Final Fantasy VII is a pretty big one. He's had a lot of different cards, you know, of course, equipment based, you know, having the Buster Sword is such a big part of his character. So it's cool to see all that kind of stuff around. But I really thought that the Mono White Cloud here was just the best one of the coolest ones, sort of a Stoneforge sort of effect. A really powerful effect. So of course we're mono white Voltron. That's the whole point of the deck, but we get to do a lot of really cool stuff that you don't get to do with a lot of other Voltron type decks because we care about triggers rather than just straight good equipment. So we get to run a lot of swords and that sort of thing. It's pretty fun. Definitely consider this a bracket 3 deck. I don't think we have anything too crazy in here. You know, mono white you can only go so far with. Got a few game changers and things like that, but nothing too over the top. Just kind of good Voltron fun. So Cloud here, Cloud Midgar Mercenary, is a 2 white mana, 2/1 legendary human soldier mercenary. So, you know, soldier might also end up mattering for some builds. So when he enters, you search your library for an equipment card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So sort of that Stoneforge sort of effect. You know, this is a great card, pretty much any Voltron deck. I think it's really fun as a commander because he also says as long as he is equipped, if an ability of Cloud or an equipment attached to it triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. So there's so many different triggers, most notably the Sword of Blank and Blank, like Sword of Fire and Ice, Sword of Feast and Famine, that sort of thing. All of those have attack or damage triggers. So when you're dealing damage to a player, you know, with Sword of Feast and Famine, they have to discard cards and you untap all your lands. So you get 2 of those effects, which is really good. And very specifically, the way he is worded is if him or an equipment attached to him triggers, that he gets an additional trigger, because a lot of equipment are kind of all over the place. Sometimes the equipment itself has the triggered ability on it, and sometimes it gives whatever creature it's attached to that ability as well. So it kind of catches everything, which is kind of nice. We do have some auras in here, as you can see, but mostly just a few things that I think are kind of nice for the deck. The sort of all that glitters effects that, you know, just pump our commander really big, because he is only a 2/1 to start with, and a lot of our other equipment don't super pump him because we care more about the triggers and the sort of versatility of that rather than just, you know, straight power, which I think is kind of the fun part of him. So yeah, kind of just a lot of different equipment. We'll kind of go through them. You know, we've got down here in the deck 25, a quarter of our deck is just equipment. So we got a lot to run through. Firstly here, we got the auras. So, you know, of course, he doesn't care about auras, but we do have some aura tutors, and of course, Voltron-y type stuff. Usually artifacts and equipment kind of go together, so that's kind of fun. Or auras and equipment specifically. So all that glitters is a 2-mana aura, enchant creature. Enchant creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact and or enchantment you control, so, you know, it just synergizes with itself. So when you put a few different artifacts on him, you know, he gets buffed really, really big, really fast. All glitters is a great card, very good for what we're trying to do. And of course, being able to hit both artifacts and enchantments, it's just you control. So some artifacts and some of these all that glitters type effects do care specifically about either stuff attached to him or maybe just artifacts or whatever. But the fact that this cares about everything, and it's everything you control, so like your Soul Ring and your Arcane Signet, that sort of stuff also counts towards it, which is really cool. Just a huge buff for our commander. It's really, really nice. Idolized is sort of similar. So this is from the Fallout precon. So enchant creature, it has whenever this creature attacks alone, it gets +X/+X on turn, where X is the number of non-land permanents you control. So this in a way is even better. It is an attack trigger to get the buff, and it has to attack alone, which of course there's almost never a time in this deck that you're going to be attacking with 2 or more creatures, so you don't really have to worry about that too much. But it gets pumped equal to the number of non-land permanents you control, so it casts an even wider net than all that glitters. So, you know, if you've got, you know, planeswalkers out on the battlefield, it counts creatures, which is really cool because we do run a good amount of utility creatures in the deck. So everything, this is just kind of another one of the same type of effect, but, you know, even stronger in some ways. And lastly, we've got Mantle of the Ancient. So this one specifically is kind of nice because one thing that happens with a lot of these effects, if you get blown out with like a Vandal Blast or something, be able to reanimate your equipment and auras is really, really nice. And that's exactly what Mantle of the Ancients does. So it's a 5-mana enchantment that says, when it enters, return any number of target auras and or equipment cards that could be attached to an enchanted creature from your graveyard to the battlefield attached to that enchanted creature. And then it also isn't all that glitters effect. It gets the creature gets +1/+1 for each art and equipment attached to it. So One big thing with this deck is the sort of cheater effects, because a lot of the equipment, they have equip costs and that sort of thing, and they're really hard to cast. So anything that we can kind of cheat costs of either automatically equipping to stuff, or we're able to put stuff into play, both of those effects are really, really nice and kind of allow the Voltron deck to sort of get up to speed a lot faster, and this does exactly that. So you can put a bunch of your stuff from your hand on the battlefield and from graveyard on the battlefield. It's kind of just nuts. I really like this card. It does so much for what we're trying to do. And the auto equip is also really, really good. So this is like if you get blown out by a Vandal Blast or something like that, or, onto Inversion or something that blows up, all non-land permanents, this is a huge one to immediately replay and, get not only the effects of whatever equipment you're attaching to it, but also, of course, the effects of itself by pumping equal to the number of things attached to it. So that's really cool as well. For board wipes, we really aren't trying to run a whole lot, and I do like, especially in white, you have a lot of these single creature board wipes, where, Divine Reckoning, 4-mana sorcery, says each player chooses a creature they control and destroys the rest. There's like a lot of those type of things. There's one that is specifically just for commanders. There's one that everyone puts a counter on their stuff. Everything without that counter can't attack. Everything with the counter can't attack you. And then, they wipe everything else, so that's kind of nice. There's a lot of different ones in here. Single combat's kind of cool. It prevents people from casting anything but creature spells. So you can kind of also sort of silence people for a turn, and people can only attack and block with one creature, which is really cool. So those type of effects are also kind of nice. And then also threw Farewell in here because for one, the modal spell. So if we want to get rid of something specific, destroy, exile creatures if we need to, even if it does, sort of hurt us. The modality of this, I almost threw an austere command as well. Just being able to select what we want and not get rid of everything. Of course, we're almost never going to be picking artifacts for this one because we want to keep those around. So having that's always nice. And Farewell is just a really, really good card. Card advantage, we actually have quite a lot for a white deck, especially because a lot of our equipment are, giving us some sort of card advantage by themselves, and the double triggers another big thing that we're going to get a whole bunch of stuff off of that, so that's kind of cool as well. Archivist of Ogma, cool little. A lot of the whites have sort of like gotcha cards where Archivist, you can flash it in whenever an opponent searches the library, you gain a life and draw a card. So fetches, tutors, anything like that, cultivate type effects, anything where they have to go search the library for stuff. This is really good if you can get it down turn like 2 or whatever. Of course, the flash is kind of nice because you can just do it whenever someone would tutor. I'm kind of catch them off guard, sort of an opposition agent effect, but you don't have to worry about them stealing the tutor. It's not as reprehensible for most people to have an Archivist, because drawing a card isn't that bad. And white takes what it can get in terms of card draw, so that's kind of nice. If you have a green player at your table, you're probably gonna be really happy with this card because it's gonna draw you a whole lot. And a lot of people just don't care, even if it's out, even if you don't have to flash it out, people just still tutor because they don't really care. If you get a card draw, whatever, it's not a big deal. So just kind of a nice one. And this one has gone down in price since its original release, which is really nice as well. Easy to pick up. Not so much with Esper Sentinel, so this one's definitely risen in value. It's only been printed in Modern Horizons 2, and then it kind of had a weird little reprint in Modern Horizons 3, sort of a hard to get version of it. So kind of a more expensive card, but it's one of the best card draw in white because it's, sort of a heuristic study type effect. So it's a 1-mana 1/1. Whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless that player plays X, where X is Sentinel's power. And I almost didn't put this in the deck because I know it's fairly expensive, but Esper Sentinel is kind of an interesting card because it does not specify a mana cost specifically. It's a varying cost. So, of course, it's a 1/1. So normally, whenever anyone plays this, it's just, you draw unless that opponent pays 1. But because we're in an equipment deck and have ways to buff our creatures, even if you gave Esper Sentinel +2/+2 or whatever, people are not going to be paying 3 for their first non-creature spell. It's just too high of a tax. A lot of times they won't even pay the 1 because they need the mana. So even if you can pump this a little bit with some of the equipment, attach 1 or 2 things onto it to make it big enough, you just get a free card draw every turn. And of course, 1 mana, if you can get this down very early in the game, you're usually drawing a whole lot of cards. So very good card, and I like the extra synergy it has for the deck. Mask of Memory, so again, we're triggering stuff, so this is very important. It's a 2-mana equip 1 equipment, and it says whenever equip creature deals combat damage to a player, you may draw 2 cards if you do discard a card. So we're going up. This is straight up card advantage. We are getting 2 cards for dealing damage, but of course, when we have Cloud equipped, we do this twice. We get to draw 2, discard 1, draw 2, discard 1. So you're still up 2 cards from hitting them, and that's, I think, a pretty good rate, especially because it's card selection with drawing 2 cards then to discarding 1, so you can kind of sculpt your hand at the same time. Very nice for what we're doing, and we definitely need these effects to keep the card draw going because we're going to be casting a lot of stuff over and over because we have a lot of low cost, low to the ground stuff in our deck. Pip-Boy, it does a whole bunch of different stuff, and it's an attack trigger, which is kind of nice, but its first one is a looting effect, so you draw a card, then discard a card, so being able to do that twice is kind of cool. Pure Steel Paladin is, always one of the best cards in any Voltron deck. It has whenever an equipment enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. So that's really nice for what we're doing, especially, if you can pay 1 mana, get down equipment, and then also draw a card off of it. That's a really good rate for what we're doing. And also we're, in mono white, so Secret Rendezvous is a great include. It's 3 mana, draw 3, and target opponent draws 3. So, no one's really going to be countering this. It's something that you're always going to get off of it. And it doesn't look as scary when someone else also gets the card draw, kind of takes some of that pressure off of you as well. SRAM, Senior Edificer, so 2 mana, 2/2. Whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle, draw a card. So again, just kind of nice. It's a little bit better on the cast because if someone does counter one of your equipment with like Pure Steel Paladin, if it didn't enter, it just got straight up countered. You don't get the card draw, but no matter what happens, SRAM does give you the card draw, which is really cool. Kind of an easy card, and also triggers off of our auras, which is kind of nice. So swords, we have a lot of the swords in here. I try not putting many of the swords that give pro white because that gets kind of difficult if you have anything targeted, because it's, just protection from all white cards, including yours. So, if you got a creature with pro white, you can't really equip auras to it. They just immediately fall off. Or if you have already auras equipped to it, those also immediately fall off. You can't target them with auras. You can't do anything with it. If you have some sort of targeted effect with a creature or whatever, that also doesn't work. So you kind of got to be careful. But Sword of Fire and Ice is a really good one of the best ones. +2/+2 and protection from red and blue. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage, it deals 2 damage to a target creature or player, and you draw 2 cards. I think it's just been eroded to any target. This is sort of an old printing of the card. So you get to shock something twice, so 4 damage with Cloud, and you get to draw 2 cards, which is kind of just awesome. Very good effect. And with these, of course, like the attack trigger is always nice, but the biggest of it is the protection, being able to just kind of get through, having red and blue creatures not being able to block. You're usually going to have with one of these swords a very good attack and be able to get in a lot of times, especially, it kind of synergizes with itself that it has a damage trigger, but also gives you the evasion. So that's kind of the reason why these cards are so good. One of the newer ones, sort of Forge of Frontier, so pro red and green. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to a player, you exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn, and even play an additional land this turn. So, of course, for the card advantage side of it, when you deal combat damage, you're getting 4 cards with Cloud, which is awesome, and being able to play them until end of turn. Really nice. For these kind of effects, whenever you do some sort of like impulse draw, I always try to remind people, and this card is a little bit better with it, that you kind of want to wait, if you know you're going to be playing this type of card, wait to hit your land drops until after you've exiled stuff if you can, because if you exile lands and you can't play them till end of turn, you're kind of just exiling those from your deck permanently. This does give you an extra land drop, so even then you do, it kind of gives you back exactly what you want, and getting 2 extra land drops is pretty nuts. When you have Cloud out, so that's kind of nice as well. But yeah, just kind of make sure that you kind of wait and hold up your hand with these exile type of effects. And then lastly here, the One Ring, of course, we're monocolored, so I felt a little bit better about throwing the One Ring in here. We don't have a lot of card draw in general in white, so I was like, throw in a bomb or 2. I already know this is going to be, use our game changers up when we can, our 3 slots. So I think the One Ring's a very good one of those, if not a little expensive, of course. And creatures, we got a good amount of creatures, or cheaters, not creatures. Like I said earlier, this is a big part of the deck, being able to cheat out stuff from your deck, either cheating in equipments into play, but a lot of these just allow you to equip for free, which even that by itself, a lot of times something will have a low equip or a low mana cost and a high equip cost. Colossus Hammer being one of the most prime sort of examples of that. But Arden, so one of the cards that a lot of times is the sort of default Voltron commander, I feel like, because it's got partners, so you can pick a different color, usually like a red, but it has, at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may attach any number of R's and equipment. You control the target permanent or player, so you're able to just immediately move all your stuff on. This is something that, with Pro White is a little annoying, because it's you attach it to target permanent, so because it's targeting, if, our Cloud already has Pro White, Arden cannot target it to equip everything, so you got to be kind of careful with that. That's one of those few effects that, having Pro White actually does matter, but being able to just auto-attach everything we control is super, super great. Buster Sword, so of course you had to include this with the Final Fantasy. We're playing Cloud, you got to have the Buster Sword. So whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card, then you may cast a spell from your hand with mana value less than or equal to the damage without paying its mana cost. So, of course, with Cloud, this is absolutely busted, because not only is it buffing it +3/+2, so just base Cloud is going to be dealing 5 damage. That means you can cast 2 5-drops or less from your hand for free, because he double triggers. Absolutely nuts. And you get a card draw on top of that, so it even kind of fuels your hand to be able to cast for free, which is really good. kind of just a nuts card. I think, it's already going for pre-sale $40. I think this is going to be a really, sort of prime example of a good card in a lot of different formats. I think it is an extremely good sort of include to a lot of these type of decks. I think a lot of people are going to be excited to run this and stuff, but having sort of a weird, free spell stuff in colorless is kind of an interesting thing. We got Codsworth, Handy Helper. So this does a bunch of different stuff. So commanders you control have Ward 2. That's kind of nice. The big thing with this, with Ward, this one doesn't work as well, but with Ward, it is a triggered ability. So if you have an equipment with Ward, we'll kind of get to that later. We have a few of those. The Ward does trigger twice with Cloud. So if something has Ward 2, they have to pay Ward 2 twice. So they're basically paying Ward 4, and they have to pay those individually. So that's kind of a cool little extra thing. With Codsworth, he is one of our few mana dorks, so you can tap him to add 2 white mana, only spend on cast auras or equipment spells. You can really the cheater part of this is you can tap him to attach target aura equipment you control to target creature you control activated only as a sorcery. So again, sort of that cheater effect, we can just automatically attach stuff, but again with the same drawback of Arden, where it is targeting the creature that you're attaching to, so you got to make sure he does not have her white. Forge Anew, one of my favorite cards from the Lord of the Rings set. 3-mana enchantment that when it enters, you return target equipment from your graveyard to the battlefield. As long as your turn, this is one of the very rare types of effects of this, you may cast, or you may activate equip abilities at any time you can cast an instant. So I think Leon and Shikari, like there's only a few of these effects in the game that allow you to equip at instant speed. So that by itself is kind of nice. It's a reanimation effect, and it says you may pay 0 rather than pay the equip cost of the first equip ability you activate during each of your turns. So this kind of just does it all. It gives us the reanimation, it allows us to equip whenever we want to, and it allows us to equip at instant speed. There is this slight kind of weirdness where it says you may pay 0 on each of your turns. So, normally the thing is with a lot of these effects, being able to equip on your opponent's turns is kind of a giant thing. If someone tries to Swords to Plowshares a creature and you're able to, protect it in some sort of way or shift over and equip like a Swiftfoot Boots or something, that's really nice. But specifically here, it's only on your turns to pay the 0 equip cost. So if you are doing it on other people's turns, you do have to still pay the equip unless you already have a free equip. That's kind of the only little wrinkle there. But otherwise, I think this is just an amazing card. Alvar, God of Battle. It does have, this is one of the flip gods from Kaldheim. It does have a backside. It gives +2/+0 and vigilance to the creature, and then when creature dies, you turn to its owner's hand. We don't really care about the backside. It's kind of a bad equipment. The front side is really the thing, the creature here. So it's a 4-mana 4/4. It says creatures you control that are enchanted or equipped have double strike. That by itself is awesome. There's only so many ways to get double strike. It's a little easier with equipment in colorless or in mono white, but getting double strike for free off of a creature is just kind of nice. And it says at the beginning of each combat you may attach target aura or equipment attached to target creature you control to target creature you control. So you can kind of move equipment from one thing to another. Another kind of wrinkle here is it says from target creature equipped to another target creature that's equipped. So you do already have to have whatever equipment on a creature to be able to re-equip it with Alvar, which is kind of weird. You can't just play an equipment, go to combat and attach it. It has to have already been attached to something. So you can move stuff around, which is kind of nice. Though mostly with this card, the biggest thing is the fact that just equip creatures you control have double strike. This is one of the few cards in the deck that you might actually end up, having multiple creatures that swing out because double strike, is such a powerful keyword. Hammer of Nazan is just kind of one of the best equipments. It does a whole lot of different stuff by itself and then also gives us a cheater effect. So when it enters or another equipment enters under your control, you may attach that equipment to target creature you control. So whenever something enters the battlefield, you can automatically equip it for free. So this is everything that you have, including itself, which is kind of nice. So you can immediately start the chain. You don't even have to pay the 4 immediately to equip it itself. You can just kind of keep going and going. That by itself should probably just be a good enough equipment to run. But it also has equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has indestructible. So indestructible is another really huge keyword. Allows us to swing out a lot more. Gets around a lot of board wipes, which is really cool. Most board wipes honestly are destroy board wipes in some sort of way. So that's a huge keyword in itself. And then of course the cheater effect is the biggest part of it. So all around just also a really, really good card. Oswald Fiddlebender, sort of an interesting one, not technically caring about equipment, but it does sort of have a mono white birthing pot effect. So it's a 2-mana 2/2 and has magical tinkering. So you can pay a white, tap it, sacrifice an artifact, search your library for an artifact card with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrifice artifact's mana value, put it on the battlefield and shuffle. So, let's say you have some sort of 1 mana, like the Pip-Boy equipment or whatever, you can sacrifice it with Oswald's ability and go grab a Mask of Memory. And if you don't want the Mask of Memory, you could go sacrifice that and go grab a 3-drop, and then so on. especially with this deck, we have, you know, a whole lot of, like, if you look at a lot of our equipment, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 very easily with a lot of what we're doing. So you know, the sort of increment thing, you have to be kind of careful with a lot of your birthing pot effects, where if you don't have that kind of incremental value where you're able to kind of get everything out one at a time, and you have ways, you know, a lot of equipment, there are 2s and 3s, so you can every time, you know, reliably, you don't want to have one drop or 1 2 drop in the deck, because if you end up getting that out, then, you know, your tutoring kind of gets a lot worse. But we have a really good curve with our mana values for equipment. So honestly, an amazing card for what we're trying to do, and a really cool tutor effect. Sigarda's Aid, probably the most well-known one, so this is part of the Modern Hammer time deck, because it's so good. It's a one-mana enchantment that says you may cast art on equipment spells as though they had flash, so that's really awesome. And then whenever an equipment enters the battlefield under your control, you may attach it to target creature you control. So this is nuts, because those two effects combined, you can swing at someone, if they don't block, whatever, you know, it's just a little creature. You can then, before damage, after, you know, if they have no blocks, sort of ninjutsu in equipment, you'll be like, okay, you didn't block, I'm going to flash in my Buster Sword, I'm gonna flash in my Hammer of Nazan, and those immediately equip to that creature and then hit you for a bunch of damage you didn't think you were gonna take. So you can be way sneakier with it. I think this card is probably one of the best ones, you know, kind of just generically for equipment stuff, because it gives you so much extra combat trick to sort of run with, which is really cool. Stoneforge Mystic, you know, kind of the one of the most powerful equipment spells, because it does a whole lot, sort of what our Cloud is sort of parodying. So it's a 2-mana 1/2, and when it enters, you search your library for an equipment, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. So that's the sort of main Stoneforge type ability. But it also has pay to tap it. You may put an equipment card from your hand onto the battlefield. So, you know, this card is so good. It's run in a whole lot of different constructed formats. Really awesome to get something down, you know, for 2 mana that you couldn't otherwise. Like Helm of the Host, getting something free off of that is kind of nice. A lot of people would do it with like Cauldron Complete, or like, you know, 7, 8 mana giant equipments to get those down very easily, which is kind of nice with that as well. And then our new Coco. So we got United Battlefront. So it's 4 mana sorcery. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. Put up to 2 non-creature, non-land permanents with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield. Then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So of course, our non-creature, non-land cards are going to be equipment for the most part. And, you know, looking at our curve, most of our stuff in the deck, there's only like, you know, 2, 3 cards that are 4 mana or above. So most of the time already, you know, a fourth of the deck are equipment, so you're going to be hitting almost every single time 2 equipment around 2 to 3 mana cost with this, and they immediately go to the battlefield. You don't even have to cast them, so you usually get the discount, not only the card advantage off of United Battlefront, because you're getting to look at stuff, being able to cheat them in and cheat the mana costs of those equipment is also really, really good. I love this card. I'm surprised it's not more expensive. I really like this one. Really cool sort of new include from Tarkir Dragonstorm. Kind of skip over the equipment here because we got them in a whole bunch of different categories. Just kind of wanted to show that we do have quite a lot in here, and that we are working with a fully loaded Voltron deck. As for equipment, our interaction, we do have quite a bit. Dispatch, I really like Dispatch. I think it's one of the better Voltron interaction spells. So it's a 1-mana instant that normally just says tap target creature, but if you have Metalcraft, you can exile that creature. So Metalcraft is just an ability that says if you control 3 or more artifacts, you can turn on Metalcraft. So it's just a Swords to Plowshares with no drawback if you have 3 or more artifacts, which most of the time Metalcraft is instantly able to hit. One thing I didn't throw in this deck was Mox Opal. It's a very, very good card, but, you know, that after its unbanning in Modern has spiked up to, you know, $120, $150. So, you know, a lot of those cards I think are fun to splash in, but very much not needed. It includes very cool, but not something you have to have in every deck. But I like Dispatch a lot. Generous Gift, we run this, you know, the White Beast Within, destroys target permanent, gives them a 3/3. We don't really like that we are giving them a creature off of this, but being able to get rid of anything, the sort of wide net this cast is so important and so good for the deck that's kind of the reason why I still have it in here. Get Lost, sort of a similar direction. We don't really care that they create 2 map tokens off of it, but being able to destroy a target creature, enchantment, or planeswalker is also a pretty wide net to throw, especially for 2 mana instant speed. Very good there. Sort of protection for us in the interactions side of things is Mithril Coat. It's a 3 mana flash equipment with Indestructible, and when it enters, you can attach it to target legendary creature you control, and it gives equipped creature Indestructible. So this is really good. It's a way, you know, if someone decides to, you know, get lost one of your creatures, usually Cloud, of course, legendary creature, pay 3 mana, flashes in, it automatically attaches and gives them Indestructible. And the fact that this also is Indestructible, sort of the Darksteel Plate sort of effect, is really nice as well, because it's hard to get rid of either of them. You can't destroy the equipment to then destroy the commander, and you can't destroy the mana to then destroy the equipment. So both sides of it, also just a really good card. We got Path to Exile in here, and Swords to Plowshares, of course, just sort of our normal everyday, you know, creature interaction. Reprieve, our one sort of halfway counter spell, return target spell to its owner's hand, and then draw a card. So sort of, this is always best as sort of a gotcha as well on like an X spell if someone's going to doppelgang something huge or Gen Wave or whatever where they're tapping out for everything. Or, even if they, they're casting, they have 9 mana, they're casting a 5 mana spell, they only have 4 left where they can't recast it that same turn. You can kind of delay that inevitability, which is kind of nice there. Silence. Also just a really good white card. I feel like if you're running a mono white deck, you almost always need this in here. Just an instant that says your opponent can't cast spells this turn. A lot of people also use Orum's Chant because it's sort of the exact same thing, except you can kick it to make it so they can't attack either. But silence just by itself, just allowing your opponent, it kind of time walks opponents a lot of times. It makes them skip their turn because they can play a land, maybe attack if they have something, but most of the time they can't do a whole lot and they just end up having to pass. Just a very, very strong effect. Stroke of Midnight, destroy target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a 1 white human creature token, so sort of just another generous gift to make sure that we hit the stuff that we need to hit. Teferi's Protection, one of our other game changers in here. It's kind of just too good to not want to have in a deck. Being able to just kind of leave the game for a turn is extremely good. We can't, our life total can't change. We have protection from everything. All of our permanents phase out, so it's also good in response to a board wipe. If you're going to get Farewelled or whatever, immediately getting rid of your board and kind of taking yourself out of that situation is really nice. And a lot of times, you're getting to, you're getting out of 3 players' turns. So even if you are arch enemy or whatever, you're able to kind of have a second turn after that and kind of get away with it. So in a lot of ways, it can also be treated as sort of an extra turn spell. And then, of course, the other text on the One Ring besides the card draw effect is when it enters, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything till your next turn. So not quite the same effect because you still can be board wiped and whatnot, but you can't really die because you can't be dealt damage and that sort of thing. And if people swing out, you also protection from creatures so they don't deal damage. So sort of a similar effect. And, of course, the card draw on top of it is just kind of nuts. In terms of lands, we're not running a whole lot of lands because, as you saw, our curve is kind of caps out at 3 for the most part. Running 26 planes because there's a whole lot of good other sort of utility lands we can run in here. So Buried Ruin, really nice, allows us to reanimate artifacts from our graveyard, which is kind of cool, or just return artifacts from our hand or from our graveyard to our hand. It's just one of those few ways to get that stuff back. For more Vault is sort of a cute synergy. You can pay 3 mana, tap it, discard a card, look at the top X cards of your library, X number of artifacts you control, put one of those into your hand, and the rest in the bottom of a random order. So, of course, we're going to be running a whole bunch of artifacts. Even if you can pay, look at the top 5 or whatever, sort of a good card selection effect on top of that. Inventor Fair is also really good, being for your upkeep. If you control 3 or more artifacts, you gain 1 life. That's kind of a weird card text. I don't really know why that has it on there. It's not really, maybe it's flavorful or something. I don't know too much about Kaladesh. But really the fact that you can pay for and sacrifice it, search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, and put it in your hand, and then shuffle. And then it also has Metalcraft. You can only activate it if you have control 3 or more artifacts, but it's, having an artifact tutor on land is really good. Speaking of, we have Urza Saga in here because it's nuts in this deck. We have a whole lot of 1-drops artifacts to search for. So, of course, it's a saga, so it slowly ticks down. So the first one, it immediately gains the ability to tap for mana. 2, you can make a construct. You can pay 2, tap it, create a 0/0 construct token equal. It has power equal to the number of artifacts you control. So that's really good. Of course, we're going to be having a whole bunch of equipment. And then with the giant equipment, even if it's a 4/4 or 5/5, being able to, if you need to load up some stuff on top of that is kind of nice. Having an 8/8 with the, pro, red, and green is kind of nuts. And especially if you can give, lifelink or whatever. So you can kind of get a little bit of extra out of that. A lot of times in decks, the second ability doesn't matter too much. It is pretty good for what we're doing. And of course, the most important one is the third saga effect. It sacks and you tutor for an artifact with mana value 0/1 to put on the battlefield. So we have so many different ones that allow us to do that. So that's a really nice effect for what we're doing. War Room, you pay 3, tap it, pay life equal to the number of colors in your commander's color identity. So 1 life because we're only monocolored. Draw a card, so just being able to pay 3, tap, draw a card. So kind of 4 mana because you also have to tap this land, but having that on the land just in case. Like I said, we are in mono white, and so we kind of take whatever card draw we can get. Rogue's Passage, just in case we need to. We're of course really trying to get in with combat damage, so being able to make a creature unblockable if we can, kind of nice. It is kind of hard because paying 5 mana to make something unblockable is a whole lot of mana to pay, but having that extra utility on land is just kind of nice, especially because we're monocolored. We can kind of take the generic mana in stride for the most part. Measteer, probably one of my favorites in here. It enters tapped unless you control a legendary creature, which most of the time we will. Taps for a white, and then you can pay 2, tap it, draw a card, activate if you've attacked with 2 or more creatures this turn. A little weird with this deck because you're not always attacking with at least 2 creatures, but if you really need to, you can get in with 2 creatures. There's enough creatures in the deck that we can swing with that. Maybe even load them up with equipment so they don't die. But getting, the card draw, just another nice thing to have on I'm on a land. Monumental Henge from Modern Horizons 3. Enters tap unless you control planes, which most of the time we're going to. It taps for a white, and you can pay for and tap it to look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a historic card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. And of course, historic cards are sagas, legendaries, and artifacts. So we're going to be looking for equipment most of the time, which is really cool, though we can, because legendaries also count, we could grab something, like one of our legendary, most of our creatures are legendary or sort of close to that, so we can grab those. And, if we end up somehow hitting our Urza Saga off of that, that could also work. Grab that off the Monumental Henge, but kind of just another way to look for artifacts if we really need to. And then lastly, I did throw Nykthos in here, mostly because Cloud himself just has 2 white pips, and we do have, a good amount of creatures, and, some of the R's also have white pips. Not the strongest deck. You definitely don't need Nykthos in here at all. But I just thought, we don't have a whole lot of ramp in mono white that isn't catch-up ramp, so I wanted to make sure we sort of had a little bit of extra in case we needed it. But, even if you can get, net neutral mana out of this, or 1 or 2 extra mana, that by itself is kind of good enough. For ramp, we do have a good amount of what we're looking for, especially when you look at equipment. It's a little better in this deck, of course, because we get those double triggers. So, of course, we've got Arcane Signet, we've got Pearl Medallion to reduce all our white spells, Thought Vessel just to have a max hand size is kind of nice, also an artifact count, Soul Ring, we got Foundry Inspector, which reduces all of our artifact spells by 1 mana cost. So, of course, that can make a lot of our spells, all of our 1-drops free, and just reducing that, having the mana cost of our 2 mana spells and you're dropping it down by a third for our 3 mana spells, we can cast a whole lot of stuff very fast with that. Sid Free Flyer Pilot from the new Final Fantasy set is also really cool. It makes equipment and vehicle spells we cast 1 less, so sort of the same thing as Foundry Inspector. During our turn, he gains flying. Doesn't really matter because we're not really attacking with him, but you can also pay 2 to tap him to return target equipment or vehicle card from your graveyard to your hand, so also a reanimation on top of that. Just another good creature to have for the deck. We kind of talked about Codsworth being a mana dork already. So 3 mana comes down. You can tap for 2 mana to cast our equipment and auras, which is nice. One of our few pieces of actual catch-up ramp in the deck, Deep Gnome Terramancer, so it's sort of the same effect as our guy up here. Our Archivist of Ogma, where you kind of catch people off guard. It has flash, so you can immediately flash it in. With Demon specifically, it says whenever 1 or more lands enter the battlefield under an opponent's control without being played, you may search the library for a plains card, put on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So if you did run, this specifically says plains and not basic plains. So if you were in multiple colors, you could grab dual lands or tri-lands or whatever. Or, there's a few, plains cards that are also in mono white that you could grab. This works great in conjunction with the Archivist because, most of the time when someone puts a land into play that isn't being played as their land for the turn, it's usually off a tutor effect of some sort of, of some kind. So both of those together are really good, but just by itself, getting to grab stuff to the battlefield, something to hand, also ramps you at the same time, is also pretty good. And it does not actually care about the number of lands anyone controls. It's just when they put more lands into play. So it doesn't have to be catch-up ramp. You can be kind of at the same level. Lost GTA. So this does a whole bunch of different stuff. Of course, it's the sort of an ode to Umezawa's GTA. When a creature deals combat damage to a player, you put a charge counter on it. That is really good in this deck because you get 2 charge counters every time you deal combat damage. So if you get double strike, you can get 4. You can kind of get crazy. That's another reason why we very much value a double strike in this deck, is because our attack triggers, or our damage triggers specifically, where if we can damage someone, we already get double triggers off of that, but then we get double triggers because we're hitting them twice. So you can get up to 4 triggers off of 1 equipment. Is very, very good. You can remove charge counters from this to either untap a land, which is the ramp part of it, being able to untap 1 or 2 lands every time we attack with someone is pretty good. And the first time this comes down, it's a 1 mana also equip 1, so it can immediately pay for itself when you deal combat damage. You can also make target creature can't block this turn. It's a little bit weird on this one because this is a damage trigger, so you have to have already gotten in and dealt damage and gotten the counter to get that. So it's sort of a preemptive thing where like, okay, I dealt damage, next turn you can't attack with your creatures. Kind of a weird one. And then you can also put a +1/+1 counter on equip creature. We mostly for this one care about the untapped target land. I think that's what make this card good in any way, because we have enough pump effects, we can make stuff unblockable, or kind of get evasion through a lot of different means. But the land part is really good for such a cheap equipment. Pip-Boy we've also kind of talked about. It can also put up some +1 counter on target creature. This is sort of just a better Lost GTA most of the time. It does cost 1 more to equip, but it's also an attack trigger, so you can get the card draw, you can get the counter, and the one we care about is untap up to 2 target lands. So with Cloud's ability, getting to untap 4 lands whenever you just attack is extremely good. It's got a lower requirement than having to deal damage with Lost GTA. and, you know, getting twice as much off of it is also really, really nice. Just kind of a good equipment all around for the deck. Sword of Feast and Famine. When it deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card and you untap all lands you control. This one, I can't say it's a nombo, but it's not quite as good with our commander because we're untapping our lands during combat. So you can't float the mana and try to go to your next main phase to untap them because we get 2 untaptures of all of our lands. Though if you have something, you can do it instant speed. You know, if you have some sort of equip ability, you can do it instant speed, or just one of our instants or whatever. If you dump that mana into one of our utility lands, that's kind of nice. So that double untap ability doesn't always matter, but Sword of Feast and Famine is just kind of great. When you're dealing combat damage to untap all your lands and kind of getting a lot of times almost an extra turn out of that is just awesome. And, you know, pro red green or pro green black is also, you know, you're getting protection from a lot of different removal spells, which is cool. We've also talked about sort of Forge and Frontier. So the card draw kind of exile is kind of nice. The impulse drop, but of course, when you do combat damage, you're getting an extra land drop. So, you know, double trade, you're getting 2 extra land drops on a turn is kind of just nuts. Very good being able to kind of dump your hand on top of stuff. And of course, because it's exiling cards, you get the top 4 cards and you can play 2 lands from that is also really good. So even if you don't have stuff in your hand, it can kind of fuel itself, which is really, really awesome. Sword of Hearth and Home is our one pro white card in here because it just synergizes so well from the deck. So of course, creature gets +2/+2 in pro green white. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, exile up to 1 target creature you own, then search your library for a basic land card, put them both onto the battlefield under your control, then shuffle. So the tutor effect is really good because whenever you're dealing damage, you're going to need to tutor up 2 basic lands onto the battlefield, and just as to the battlefield, it is not tapped. So you immediately get those lands untapped, which is even better ramp. But you can flicker a creature you control. So you just exile and return it. We do have a few different ETB effects on some of our stuff. But really, even if you have this equipped to Cloud, being able to flicker him twice, he also has the ETB ability of tutoring a card. So that by itself is awesome. So attached to Cloud, this is honestly a very, very good card. It does a whole lot for what we're doing because it ramps us and gives us 2 different tutors. It's just all around a very, very good card. And lastly here we got Sword of the Animist, also very good for what we're doing, you know, kind of a generically good, you know, since the olden days has kind of been the good ramp spell to run for, you know, white and that kind of thing, kind of what a lot of them kind of prop themselves up on. Whenever a equipped creature attacks, you may search your library for a basic land card, put on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Of course, way better in our deck, getting 2 basics off of it, and it gives +1/+1. Doesn't really matter for that, mostly the fact that we get 2 basics, kind of a good ramp with that. So for a ramp, like I said, having the double triggers really makes us a whole lot better. We have quite a lot of ramp for what we're doing, but a lot of these also do have multiple effects. They happen to have some sort of mana ability on top of them. For tutors, we do have a few. So we kind of already talked about Oswald. He's able to sort of birthing potter stuff, getting more stuff out for free. Stormforge Mystic, also ETBs, and our commander as well. Allows us to tutor for artifacts. Our last game changer here, Enlightened Tutor, very, very good. So try for an artifact or enchantment card, reveal it, put it on the top, then shuffle. So being able to kind of do that, at an end step or anytime before your draw step is kind of nice. Being able to get whatever we need. Open the Armory is just kind of the same thing. It's on our equipment card specifically. So Enlightened Tutor is 1 less mana, it's instant speed, and it gets just any artifact or equipment. Open the Armory is kind of more specific, but most of the time with this deck, for Voltron deck, our equipment is what we're grabbing anyway off of Enlightened Tutor, so this also just tutors it directly to hand, which is really cool. You don't have to wait to draw it. And sort of in that same vein, a little bit better than that is Steel Shaper's Gift. So it just says search your library for an equipment card specifically, so you don't get auras, but we're not really built around auras, so we don't care about them most of the time. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then draw. Or not draw, but you get to just put it into your hand. So it's 1 less mana. It's a little bit more narrow, but for this deck, it doesn't really matter. So not a whole lot of tutoring in this deck. And you could consider, some other stuff tutoring if you wanted to, but I consider these just straight tutors that are on land tutors. Not a whole lot of extra you can add in here for tutors. There's only so much you can do in mono white, but I think we have a pretty good lineup here. And we have a whole lot of value. So, of course, we're just kind of generically wanting to get triggers out of the deck. So there's just a lot of stuff that doesn't fit into any other categories, but that are still really good. I really like Brotherhood Regalia. So this is one of those that gives a equipped creature Ward 2. As an assassin to in addition to its other types. Doesn't really matter. But it also can't be blocked. So this is one of our best evasion effects. But, of course, that Ward 2 is really Ward 4 when equipped to our commander, which is really good. It also has, it's a 2 mana. Can either be just regularly equipped for 3 mana, but it has equipped legendary creature 1. So it's also very easy to get on our commander. Just all around a very good card. One of the best cards from Assassin's Creed. Another one from here is, I think it's Caduceus, Staff of Hermes, 3 mana legendary artifact equipment. Gives a quick creature lifelink. We don't have a whole lot of lifelink in the deck, so that's kind of nice to have that little extra ability. But it also has the broken aspect to it. Says as long as you can have 30 or more life, which of course you start at 40, so that's immediately triggered as long as you don't go under. Quick creature has +5/+5, has indestructible, and has prevent all damage that we've dealt to this creature. Kind of just nuts. It's great because it kind of feels itself, because it gives the creature not only lifelink, so when it deals damage, you can get your life total above 30 pretty easily, and then once you have it above 30, it also gives that creature +5/+5, so you're getting even more life from just this equipment by itself. The indestructible is also very nuts, and being able to prevent all combat damage is super good. Allows you to attack in a lot easier and not have to worry about risking your creature. So just all around a very good, I think our only white white colored equipment in here, but very good for what we're trying to do. Colossus Hammer, just the namesake, a very broken equipment, especially if you can get it for free, the free equip. It's a 1 mana equipment that has equip 8, which is very hard to pay. That's a lot of mana, but it gives equip creature +10/+10, and they lose flying. Flying we don't really care about. Most of our stuff doesn't fly. We're getting evasion through some other method most of the time. But the +10/+10 is just a huge buff for a 1 mana spell. So very good. Commander's Plate, another good piece of evasion. It also has a kind of a weird 2 equip ability. So it's a 1 mana equipment that says equip 5 or equip Commander 3. And it gives equip creature +3/+3 and protection from each color that's not in your commander's color identity. So this is just protection from everything that's not white, which is really good. Most of the time this is going to just be unblockable for your stuff, can't be targeted. Sort of just a good swords effect for this deck, and the fact that it's not just everything. It discludes your commander's color identity is great for what we're doing, because we're still able to target with the stuff that we want. It doesn't go down stuff. The only thing with white is our stuff can still get swords very easily. Even getting indestructible and that sort of thing doesn't really matter, because there's so many exile effects in the game. But just paying 4 mana at most to attach this to a commander is just very good. Fire Shrieker, one of our other few outlets of double strike, is very nice. Kind of a 5 mana to get this on equipment is sort of high for this deck. Though a lot of times we're going to be just cheating the sound some way, and double strike is just so huge, because we have so many attack triggers to double. One of my favorite new cards, especially for this deck, but just in all of the new Final Fantasy set, is Genji Glove. It's a 5 mana, one of our, I think actually just straight up our most expensive equipment. Gives equip creature double strike, so again, one of our few instances of double strike, but it also has whenever equip creature attacks, if it's the first combat phase of the turn, untap it. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. So I think this is the only way to get extra combats in colorless. It's an absolutely insane effect. I'm getting both double strike and extra combats, but on top of everything else, it also double triggers with our commander, which is absolutely nuts. Getting 3 combats during the turn. Of course, this would kind of go infinite very easily if it didn't say first combat phase, but because it is the first combat phase, we still get the double trigger, because that's when it checks, is during that. But we do get 2 extra combats after that. So double strike, 2 extra combats. Most of the time, you're able to swing, at 3 different players if you want to. This is probably just death for them, but just on top of everything else, just absolutely busted. Very cool. And another thing, Helm of the Host is very good. So at the beginning of combat on your turn, create a token that's a copy of equipped creature, except that token isn't legendary. That token gains haste. So I kind of didn't want to throw this in here at first, because I didn't see being that good. But then I realized what exactly we're doing. So with what we have here is the fact that with Cloud specifically, if we look at his card text, he says, as long as it's equipped, if an ability of Cloud or an equipment attached to it triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. So you're able to equip a whole bunch of different Clouds, which is really nice. If you want to, you're just getting a whole bunch of different things, and they're non-legendary, so they stick around if you want to. But more than anything, that's always nice. But it's also the fact that when we're creating those enter the battlefield, and so we're getting 2 Clouds off of that. They both enter and they both trigger to get us 2 tutors on top of that. So we're getting some extra value off of just having more creatures on the battlefield. With that effect, but mostly the fact that we're getting 2 tutors every time at the beginning of each of our combats is really nuts. I think this is a very good card for what we're doing. Lorien Brooch, or Trailblazer's Boots, gives Equip creature non-basic land walk. Of course, most of the time that's just going to be unblockable because most people are running even in monocolored. We are a monocolored deck, but we're running a good amount of non-basics. So just modern Magic, most of the time they're going to be having some sort of non-basics in the deck. So this is kind of just another one, good one to get on sort of that unblockable on, which is very cool. There's quite a few other ways to get unblockable in the deck, but I kind of didn't want to throw too many in there, especially because we have a lot of other evasion in different ways we don't need at all. Master of Ingenuity, just when it enters, you can have it enters a copy of any equipment on the battlefield. So if someone else has something really cool, like a sword that you want that you don't have on the battlefield, you can do that. Or if you're like, oh, in this situation, I'd rather have that, you can do anything. But most of the time, this is copying like another sort of Body and Mind or something like that, or another Colossus Hammer, just to have even more triggers off of what we're doing. Sabine's Reclamation, one of our other few reanimation targets for, just any reanimation in the deck is kind of nice, but this is, mostly for equipment. So I love this card. I run it in a lot of decks because it just has so much utility. So it's a 3-mana sorcery that says return target permanent with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. And then it has flashback for 5. It says if this spell was cast from a graveyard, you may copy the spell and you may choose new targets for the copy. So with this, you can kind of use it 3 times in a way where when you cast it, you can get any permanent with mana value 3 or less from graveyard to the battlefield. That's we kind of already talked about it. Our mana curve kind of mostly tops out at 3, so we're able to get pretty much everything back from the graveyard very easily with that. And then when we cast it from the graveyard, we are paying 2 extra mana, but we get an additional copy of Sabine's Reclamation. So you get 2 things from the graveyard. So, just this card, if you're able to cast it from hand, you're getting 3 things back for free, or not for free. We're able to cheat 3 things back into play, and we have a lot of targets, so just all around, again, a very good effect for what we're doing, but just in general, I think this card is good for most commander decks. Swiftfoot Boots, again, you definitely don't want to run. You got to be careful with these decks to not run Lightning Greaves, because Lightning Greaves has Shroud and equip abilities and enchantments target creatures. So, of course, Shroud, it can't be targeted by anything, including your own stuff. So you want to make sure that you're not running Shroud effects if you can, because it does not allow you to target that creature. And if you only have one creature and you have Lightning Greaves attached to it, you can't unequip the Lightning Greaves, and so you can't equip any new equipments to it. So Swiftfoot Boots way better for this deck than Lightning Greaves is. Sort of Body and Mind, just generically good. When equip creature deals combat damage, you get a 2/2 Green Wolf, so 2 2/2s, kind of just, go wide effect, I guess. But the biggest part of this is the defending player also mills 10 cards from their library. So milling 20 off of someone, as well as creating some 2/2s, very, very good. A few attacks from that, even if you have double strike, you're milling 40 cards, milling half their deck. People are going to deck out pretty fast with what that is. So all around, again, just kind of another good, generically good sword. And then last sword here, we got Sword of Wealth and Power. So this one is a little bit different. It's not colored. Protection. It's protection from instants and sorceries, which, again, that's going to be a lot of removal. So it's still very good for what we're doing. It has whenever equipped creature. And another thing to note with that is protection from sorceries. Most sorcery board wipes are destroy effects, which if you give a creature protection from sorceries, they can't be destroyed by sorceries, meaning that you also just dodge a lot of board wipes, so that's kind of cool. And this has whenever creature deals combat damage to a player, you create a treasure token, and then when you cast your next instant sorcery spell this turn, you copy that spell, you may choose new targets for the copy. Not the biggest thing there. It's kind of nice. We don't have, we only have so many. If you can get like an extra open the armory, that's kind of nice. We have a few instants and sorceries to copy. Not all the time. That's going to be the most relevant. You do get to, get 3 of those. You cast the originally get 2 copies with Cloud, which is really cool. Though really of the 2 effects we get, getting 2 treasure tokens with Cloud is, kind of nice as well. Just a little bit of extra sort of ramp. And then the Aether Spark. So this is what I've been wanting to throw into a deck, and I think this deck is really good for it. So it's a legendary artifact Planeswalker equipment, which is really cool. It starts at 4 loyalty, and it says, as long as the Aether Spark is attached to a creature, the Aether Spark can't be attacked and has, whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to during your turn, put that many loyalty counters on Aether Spark. So of course, that is a trigger that gets doubled with Cloud's ability, so whatever damage it deals, you get double that many loyalty. And it has a +1 that says attach Aether Spark to one target creature you control. It's up to, so you don't have to attach it if you don't want to. You can just do the uptick. And you also put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. So that's an activated ability, so Cloud won't double trigger on that. But it's mostly the fact that he double triggers the loyalty. So even if you attack with him once, most of the time you're going to be able to ult this. So it's got a -5 where you draw 2 cards. That by itself is a lot of times what you're going to be using this for over and over again. But you can also -10 to add 10 mana of any one color. So being able to get 10 mana post-combat and do whatever you want with, that most of the time is going to put you far enough ahead to just win the game. But I think a lot of times this is just going to be another card advantage engine if you want to. I could have put in the card advantage side of things, but it does so many different things. I kind of want to just throw it in the value category because it does have a lot of different uses. And then lastly here we have Threat and Power Suit. So this is sort of another all that glitters effects. It gives equipped creature +1/+1 for each R and equipment attached to it. So that's also a little bit more narrow. It's only R's and equipment attached to that creature specifically, not just all of your creatures. And it's not just artifacts and enchantments. It's very specific to what that creature is already doing, which most of the time that's already going to be the case. Most of your stuff is going to be equipped to one creature specifically. And then, you know, the other part of it being that it has ward 2. So getting the ward 4 sort of effect off of that is almost more important here. Kind of just on both ends of things, it just gives us a lot of sort of good synergy with what we're doing. And that's kind of the whole theme of the deck, is just a whole bunch of great synergy pieces. You know, we get a lot of, you know, just doubly triggering. You know, that's in such a thing Wizards has been doing lately, is just giving everything in Panharmonica an effect. We have, I think, in the same set, we have double triggers of end step triggers. We've had double ETB triggers, attack triggers, you know, landfall triggers, anything. You know, they keep doing more and more. You know, double token triggers, whatever. Roaming Throne, you know, that sort of thing can also sort of be a thing. You could add Roaming Throne if you wanted in here. To allow all of the stuff to trigger again, which is really cool. You know, just pick like human most of the time. You know, you might even be able to trigger a few of our other things in here if you wanted to. Not super necessary for the deck, I don't think, because we're already getting double triggers and we're getting enough on it anyway. But yeah, I think this is a pretty fun little deck here. A little bit different than most mono white stuff, because you kind of get to pivot into a specific type of Voltron. We're not just caring about like, oh, all the best equipment we can run. It's specifically stuff that triggers. So even sort of, you know, like Lost GT and that sort of thing that, you know, maybe isn't the best sort of equipment that we could run, become a lot better with our specific commander, which is kind of why I love Commander. Being able to use some of those weird edge case cards to, you know, make them extremely powerful with the specific sort of archetype we're running. But yeah, I hope all of you have enjoyed this video. I know I am really enjoying this set. I'm really excited for it to come out next week. Besides all that, if you want to look at this deck list, I will leave the Moxfield link in the description. If you want to check out any of my other deck lists that I've done, I will leave a link to the YouTube playlist in the description as well. But with all that out of the way, I hope to see all of you in the next one.